Olo Blitzel's Mega Mickey number 7. This is an online tournament where anything goes. So when I received the DM saying that I've got something to cook for this tournament with, I knew I was down. So what did we play, might you ask? Well, if you've seen some of my other content, you might know that I like to play Gardevoir Jellicent or Dragapult Dusknoir, and that's not at all what we have in store for today. Today, we are going to be playing Kangaskhan Bouffalant. But not just any Kangaskhan Bouffalant. If you open up Limitless TCG and search up Kangaskhan Bouffalant, you'll find that there's a few people playing the deck, and they all kind of play it the same way. What are the similarities amongst those deck lists? Most of them play Turbo Energize. Most of them only have 2 Kangaskhan. Most of them have Munkidori and Dark Energy. They got 10 energies, and for their ace spec, they're usually playing Precious Trolley. So what does this mean? It means that most of those decks, they're trying to set up off of an Arven, find Trolley, Turbo Energize, set up their Kangaskhans and the rest of their board, and then Turbo Energize to accelerate energy to their Kangaskhan's, so that they can, on the next turn, start attacking with their Kangaskhan and start flipping coins to do more damage. I, however, don't like coin flips. I don't like probability. I don't like risking things on a coin flip. So, when I want to play Kangaskhan Bouffalant, I want to play it differently. I don't want to attack with the Kangaskhan, because that means I have to flip a coin. So, that's where our list is different. We are playing a true tank Kangaskhan, or some might call it Kangaskhan Stall or Kangaskhan Walls, I guess? I don't know. So, let's get into the 60, or at least how the deck functions. Well, we have Kangaskhan in the active spot to draw 2 extra cards each turn. Then the Boofs on the bench help our boy not get one-shot, as well as we play Lively Stadium. And then we play lots of healing cards such as Penny and Wally's Compassion. And then our ace spec of choice is Scoop Up Cyclone, which is basically an extra penny so that we can play a different supporter for turn, or we can Arven for it. We additionally have the option to put a tool on our Kangaskhan in the active, which is either Handheld Fan, which is to disrupt our opponent's energy so that they can not chain attacks or eventually lock them out of the game, or Bravery Charm when we need to prevent our guy from getting hit for more than 400 damage, so we can stop that from happening because we don't want that to happen. Or if a deck doesn't really care about their energies being attached to their active Pokemon, for example, decks like Mega Venusaur where they can move their energy around, or like Armor's Box where they can also move energies around. The Handheld Fan is like negligible, so it's kind of better to have Bravery Charm on the active. Kind of. It's better if you just kind of don't have it. But yeah. So once we have that, that's like pretty set. Yeah, our goal is to prevent them from chaining attacks, prevent them from killing our guy. However, if you're like also new to something like this, the Handheld Fan is generally better to have on your Kangaskhan than your Bravery Charm. Because disrupting the opponent's energy is like, it's good for the controlled style of this deck that it is. So yeah, don't worry about that. So how do you win with a deck like this, which is trying to just survive, essentially? Well, our win condition is deck out, which means that we're trying to discard our opponent's deck so that at the start of their turn, there's no card for them to draw, so we win. So how do we do that? How do we do that if we're just surviving? Ideally, we are drawing less cards than our opponent, so that they have less cards in deck than we do, which means if we just run out the draw pass, they eventually deck out before us, as well as we run cards like Xerosix and Airy that can discard cards from their hand from their hand, which makes it so that there's less cards that they can shuffle back into their deck. And then we also play Palpad, which can shuffle cards from our discard pile back into our deck, giving us more draws, giving us more turns. And then we also play Lily's Determination alongside 4 Palpads, can get you really, really, really far. in terms of turn count. That's how we do that, especially in combination of Xerosics if we're shuffle drawing, even like if we had Iono, but I guess we also do have a one copy of Iono, which is like decently effective at stalling out the clock for turn draw count. Yeah, so that's how we win. So let's get into our tournament run with this deck. Round 1. We were paired into a Charizard Noctowl build with the Terapagos. And this matchup is pretty easy for us. Because usually a Charizard can't one-shot a Kangaskhan until we've taken prizes, and since we're not taking prizes, it's hard for them to do more damage, so we can kind of just sit and heal loop, as well as they don't play a lot of energy. Decks like Charizard only usually play like 5, 6, maybe 7 energy. Usually some of it's jet energy, which means that they can't attack with a Charizard with it. So you slap the Kangaskhan in the active with a handheld fan, they attack for you for 180, which is actually now 120, and then you move energy off to their bench guy. And then you just have to watch out for when their Terapagos gets loaded up, because it can do a little bit more damage, but also not much more. Yeah, and if you get their Terapagos in the active with no energies on it, and they have no more jets, no more Turos, they actually can't switch it out of the active, effectively making it stuck. Which is exactly what we did. We used this was the one game that we actually used our Sudowoodo. We trapped their Pidgeot for as many turns, for 2 turns, which was enough to use up both of their jets. So they had no more mobility other than maybe a Prime. Oh, they also had Prime Catcher. They had Prime Catcher, which they used on turn 2 to KO Bouffalant. So we were pretty set in terms of their mobility, and we just bossed up their Terapagos, which has 2 retreat cost, so they couldn't move it, and decked them out using Xerosics and Airy and shuffling their hand back into the... Yeah, they were cooked. As well as they quick searched every turn, which helped us get 1 extra card out of their deck, so it was -1 HP every time they quick searched. It was great. Yeah. So round 1 was, we won the first game, and since it's best of 1, that means we won the round. So now, on to round 2. Round 2. We got paired into a Gholdengo Rocks, which is a pretty solid matchup for us, which you wouldn't think it is, because in theory, Gholdengo can one-shot anything. However, Gholdengo one-shotting things takes a lot of resources. Mainly that in energies. And if you've played Guardy Jelly, you know once you run Gholdengo out of energy, they can't do anything, really. So, what is our goal? Our goal is to use Airy to snipe superior energy retrievals out of their hand, so that they can't get their energy back after they KO one Kangaskhan. If they ever KO said Kangaskhan. Because, if you have Lively Stadium, Bravery Charm, Kangaskhan with the 2 boofs, you have effectively 440 HP, which is 9 energies from a Gholdengo. And with most lists only playing 11 energies in their deck, and if they, for example, turn 1 use Lunar Cycle, discarding an energy, they attach to a Soul Rock to punch for some reason, and then have to attach to their Gholdengo, they actually can't one-shot you. So they have to be super conservative with their energies. And for lucky enough for me, in round 2, my opponent was not expecting to be against a wall deck, and they were just freely using their energies, and they even used a superior energy retrieval on turn 2 to get 2 energies back so that they could punch us for 100. Which isn't all that much. Especially because we can just Wally's Compassion, heal it all off. Now you're down an SER and 2 energies. Great. Great for us, at least. Which is exactly what we did. So eventually throughout the game, we played Xerosics, we played Airy. They couldn't one-shot. They couldn't get the 9 energy that it required at one time in their hand to punch us, because if they were saving their energy in hand, that meant there wasn't any damage on the Kangaskhan that I had to heal off, which meant I had my supporter for turn to play things like Eri, to play things like Xerosix. And if I see my Gholdengo opponent building up 12 cards in their hand, I don't want that. Xerox, yep. 3 cards in hand, please. Thank you. Which is great for us, at least. As well as Gholdengo draws a lot of cards, which means that you can deck them out pretty fast. And by we can deck them, they deck themselves out most of the time. Which means we don't actually have to do all that much. So, round 2, we won. Gholdengo was pretty good. The only issue we can run into is getting donked, but we didn't get donked. We set up. It was fine. So round 2, we won. Round 3. This was really rough. We were against a Cynthia's Garchomp player. And they were able to set up really well, and they knew what was up. So they played basically perfectly. And not only that, the matchup is really bad for us. Since our Kangaskhan's weak to fighting, they hit twice as hard as they usually would, and that's not good, because that means they can effectively one-shot Kangaskhan. And that's really bad. As well as they set up perfectly. They had 3 Garchomps and nothing else. They didn't put down Fez, they didn't put down Cynthia's Roserade or Roselia. So there wasn't anything else we could do, except for accompanying Flute and pray that we hit their Fez, which we didn't, and I don't even know if they play a Fez. But that's what I was trying to hit, because they Ultra Ball, or they would like search out their Cynthia's basics so that they had them in hand, and then I couldn't accompanying Flute them onto the bench. And basically our only game plan was to try to Sudowoodo stall their Fez, but that couldn't happen. We ended up losing far before we were able to set up a play like that. They were just too fast. They had Turbo Energize to get it energy on, and then they had all of their Pokemon Search on the ability of their Gabites. So there's nothing else we could have really done. So this was basically an auto loss for us, and rightfully so, we automatically lost. Round 4. This round, we had another deck I was not prepared for, which was Flareon Box, but not just any Flareon Box, a Flareon Box that played Dusknoir, which was not great for us, because it meant that they had the ability to one-shot a Kangaskhan. And not only that, they could play around our like deck out strategy kind of, and our inability to take prizes. So they just kind of sat there and would use their Flareon's first attack, which I think is called Burning Charge, to power up their Flareon to later attack with their Flareon, despite getting their energies handheld fanned off of their attacking Flareon. They were able to power it up, as well as they could, once they were close, they could also just hold energy in their hand, or not in their hand, they could hold their attacks until their Dusknoir was fully evolved, and then just one-shot our Kangaskhan. And all they had to do is do that exactly twice, and they would win. And that's exactly what they were able to do. They had enough recovery, they had enough energies, they had enough, basically they had everything to do it. Round 5. This was against an Absol Box deck, and they were putting on the heat. They were able to set up an Absol and start ripping cards out of my hand pretty quickly with the Claw of Darkness. However, I was lucky enough to be able to draw into a Mist Energy, so I couldn't get one shot with their Terminal Period, despite not having, they didn't really have damage set up on their guy. They did have their Absol get poisoned by Pecharunt, so it was possible they could set up a Terminal Period play, but we were lucky enough to get the Mist Energy in hand and attach that to our active, so we couldn't have that happen. However, since they were ripping the heat and tearing cards out of my hand with their Claw of Darkness, I was in a pretty rough spot. However, I was not out of the game, because I was always able to have at least 2 healing cards in my hand every turn. They couldn't rip both of them out of my hand, as well as I was able to play cards like Eri and Xerosix to make them think that those were more of a threat than the healing cards. So we were able to draw out the game and use up all of the resources that they had to the point where they started attacking with Kangaskhan, which meant that we weren't getting cards ripped out of our hand and we could set up our hand a little bit better, and we're able to flip the game into a favorable position. However, one of the biggest disadvantages of this deck is it takes forever to set up plays like this, and we just drawed out the clock. I was in the very end, I believe that I was in a favorable position. It was hard to say because we kind of just both left the game at the point when time was called so that we could get into the next round, but we ended up with a tie, which wasn't great. Round 6. This was another Gholdengo matchup, which meant we knew the strat. We try to run them out of SERs and 0-6 them, and they draw their whole deck anyway, so it's like fine. However, in this round, in this one game, this best of one round 6, we prized 2 Bouffalant, which meant that we couldn't set up a Curly Wall, which meant that they only needed 6 or 7 energies to one-shot our guy, which is still a lot of energies to have, but it's much more manageable for a Gholdengo player to do. Which also meant that they only needed about 2 SERs in deck to be able to retrieve their energies and one-shot us again, which isn't great, which meant that it was a very losing game. However, they thought it was a good idea to attack with Solrock a few times, which meant that there was an energy permanently attached to a Pokemon, which meant that they couldn't discard that to premium, or they couldn't discard that with their Make It Rain ability, which meant that they were down in energy, which we definitely capitalized off of, and it worked really well. Most Gholdengo lists play 11 energies, and if they have to attach, they only have 10 energies to discard, and they attached to another guy, which meant that they only had 9 energies to work with. So, if we were consistently 0-6ing them and healing off any damage that they decided to put on our guy, which usually wasn't a lot, it was only like 70, we were able to run them out of their resources. And once it got to a point where they couldn't kill our Kangaskhan, I knew I had won, and all I had to do was just play out the game until they decked out. And that's exactly what we did. So, at the end of round 6, we had won, which meant that we were 3-2-1, which isn't bad, I don't think. Round 7. We were against a deck that I didn't expect to play against once, but we ran into a few of those earlier. And this deck is basically an auto win for us. And it was Enzorwark. Why I think this deck is an auto win for us is unless I'm throwing and attack them, they can't one-shot our Kangaskhan. They can't put in enough work. So, what do? Well, I set up my guys. I set up my Kangaskhan in the active. I set up 2 Bouffalants. That means that Enzorwark is only hitting for 110, which if I have a Lively Stadium in play, that is not two-shotting our guy. Even without a Lively Stadium, it's not two-shotting our guy. With a Lively Stadium, it just barely 3-shots our guy, but alas, that means that every second turn I can play a 0-6 or an Airy and run them out of their resources because I don't need to play a healing card 2 turns in a row, which is phenomenal for us. And with decks like Enzorwark, they are drawing through their deck. In this particular situation, they put down 3 Zorwarks, and they traded about 3 times every turn, trying to find something. I'm not entirely sure. As well, since I don't have to heal it every turn, and since they don't one-shot slash 2-shot slash 3-shot us, basically, we get to play a handheld fan. And because of how Enzorwark works, he needs to have, En's Pokemon, they need to have not just an Enzorwark in play, but the actual attacking Pokemon. For example, the Ens Reshiram or the Ens Darmanitan in play, or eventually the Ens Zekrom. But that means that with a handheld fan, I can throw those energies onto those Pokemon that can't use the dark energy except for anything but retreating. Which is phenomenal for us, because we don't need a Bravery Charm in this matchup. We need our 2 Bouffalants, and a handheld fan on the active, and a Lively Stadium for funsies, I guess. We actually don't really need it. But they draw through their cards, they draw through the deck. We just handheld fan the energy off of the Zoroarks onto their benched Ens Pokemon that can't attack with it, and basically just win the game from there. And that's exactly how it went. The game was almost done in 10 minutes, which is crazy for a deck out strategy. You almost never get a 10-minute game. So to get a 10-minute game, and the fact that I could have done a best of 3 in the 30 minutes if all games went 10 minutes, was phenomenal. So that just proves that that matchup is really good for us. Round 8. This was against a Guardy Jelly, which is by far our hardest matchup out of the big 3. And in this matchup, in this round, I don't think our opponent had ever played against a deck that had an alternate win condition, because they seemed so lost. Eventually, halfway through the round, they were asking him, like, are you trying to tie? It's like, no, man, I'm trying to deck you out. Start playing faster. Like, they weren't intentionally slow playing. I did end up asking them, I was like, are you slow playing? And they're like, no, dude, I don't know what's going on. Which was unfortunate, because it's like, it's just a difficult matchup for us to deck them out. They have like Super Rod, they have a few ways of getting cards back into their deck, and I don't know. We can't trap their energies super effectively because it's like they have to overcommit the energy, and if they're just like going between Gardevoirs and such like that, it's, I don't know, it's tough. Tough to say the least. And yeah, eventually they were able to kill one of our Kangaskhans. However, you need to kill 2 to win a game, and they killed one of our Kangaskhans with 18 seconds left on the clock, and 2 cards left in deck, and took 10 years on their turn to decide and figure out how to do it. So we had effectively won, because after that point, there was nothing they could have, like, they couldn't have one-shot our guy again, and they didn't have any more cards to refresh their deck cycle. And yeah, we had Zero-Six them, so they had like 5 total cards in their deck, with 3 in their hands, 2 in the deck, and we had trapped a Gardevoir in the active with like 6 energy on a Drifloon on the bench, and 1 energy left. So there's nothing they could have done, because they had already played their Turo to Turo Screamtail that had lots of energy trapped on it already, which was just unfortunate. So we ended up in a tie. Which meant that we were definitely out of contention for top cut now, and that would have been effectively losing our win in a regional. We would have tied, which felt horrible, because like if I went to an IRL tournament, that's exactly what's gonna happen, and then I would have felt awful. For round 9, this was against the counterpart of our deck, the attacking Kangaskhan Bouffalon, which, as you can probably guess, is heavily favored for us. Of course it is. They need to flip 3 heads in a row to have a chance at one-shotting our Kangaskhan if we have Lively Stadium in play, and since both decks play Lively Stadium, once it's down, not going anywhere. And since we have 16 plus turns of healing and handheld fan, they need to attack us every turn, and we just move their energy off of their Kangaskhan to the point where they can no longer attack, and then we don't have to heal, and then can switch to a Zero-Six/Airy method. And since they also draw lots of cards, just like us, they deck out pretty quick. So, ultimately, we were able to finish the round it took a while. It took like 18 minutes. We still had like 7 minutes left on the clock. But, we won. We ran them out of energies with a handheld fan on the active. They never flipped 3 heads in a row. And we were able to attach 3 energies per turn. Or we ended up attaching 3 energies and attacking back. We beat Kangaskhan Bouffalon. We were actually close to beating them on prizes. If they had 1 more card in their deck, we would have beat them on taking prizes. But instead, we KO'd everything and left them with a lone Kangaskhan with I think it was 1 or 2 energy on it. Not enough to attack, no energy left in the deck. They decked out. We won. So that was our tournament run. We ended up being 5-2-2. If it was a regional, we would not have made day 2. Unless there was 9 rounds, then we might have. I don't know how that works. But yeah, that was our Kangaskhan Bouffalant deck. I hope you enjoyed our tournament run experience. Hopefully I'm able to edit this to look good. It was filmed over a few days, so that's why I've changed outfits, kind of. I'll leave the deck list up right here. Nice. Try it out sometime. Maybe take it to a regional, for real. Yeah. It was a lot of fun, actually. Like, so much fun. But I hope you guys like and subscribe if you want more content like this. I'm trying to work on some videos that I can get done soon, and I'm gonna try to go to more regionals. I think I might go to LA. I'm planning on going to LA regional, and we're gonna cook something because rotation is gonna happen, and Dragapult might be the best deck in format, but we'll have to find out because it doesn't really lose that many cards except for like Hawlucha, but the basics all have 80 HP now. But it's whatever. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.